Earlier this month, Google has actually lost its lawsuit against DOJ and has now been labeled as an actual monopoly. Now, why is this a bad thing? Why is this an issue for Google? It's because once you're labeled as a monopoly, due to our antitrust laws in the US, we can't have monopolies there. There has to be some certain fixes. Now, the issue is, as investors like myself, who invest about approximately 10% of my portfolio into Google, we don't know what the fixes are. There are a couple options here. The first option is that Google-Apple partnership, where Google pays about billions of dollars to Apple just so that Apple can have Safari and Google be the exact same thing. That can be broken up, right? The second way you can fix this is you break up Google as a whole. You break it up into many different little companies. That one, I do believe, is a lot less likely of an option. Why? It's because I think about the way that a lot of these tech companies are set up now. They're set up more as so many interconnected things into each other. For example, I think of them as human beings. Can you imagine if you took your lungs away, if you took your heart away, if you split them up into separate parts, like the body would not be able to function. And that's exactly how I believe that Google is set up. Same with Microsoft, same with all these big tech companies. That if you take away one part of this business, the whole thing falls apart. And they made sure they set up their business very, very precisely so that in cases like this, where the DOJ does go after them for monopolistic behavior, that they have this type of backup. That leaves us back to our first option, where in the first option, you break up the partnership between Apple and Google, and where Safari is no longer the only option for Google. Now, there might be Bing available, there might be DuckDuckGo. There are different options to use for Apple instead of just Google as a partnership. This might actually benefit Google, in my opinion, because all that cash flow that they're putting billions of dollars to Apple, they can use it for other ways to grow Google. And even if there is an option between Bing, DuckDuckGo, and Google, I do honestly believe that Google the performance, the reliability of the service is just so much better than the other competitors that people will still ultimately pick Google. And I don't know if you guys knew about this fun fact. Number one thing that's searched on Bing is Google, right? So people go on Bing when it's automatically filled into Bing, they look up Google and how to use Google. You might be wondering, as an investor, how is the stock doing? What should you do about it? Currently, the stock is in its very volatile moment right now. It has a lot of negative momentum. And as you can see, during cases like this, where there's a lot of unknown, the stock investors, they typically assume the worst case scenario, where they're believing Google is going to be split up into many different companies. That is definitely a possibility. It's just that way that tech companies are set up nowadays, in order for you to really, I think of them just like human beings. You can't remove its lungs. You can't, you might be able to cut a finger. Sure, the company will still survive, but you can't remove essential parts of the body. With that in mind, the most possible cases that I can see coming out of this is that they break up their partnership with Google and Apple, give Apple more options for search engines like Bing or DuckDuckGo. And another part is that the stock will be negatively impacted because it's now worrying about external factors instead of actually growing the company. They're going to be worried about having to deal with this DOJ case. Now, how am I playing this out is that I'm going to be buying as much Google stock as possible because I honestly believe Google can come out of this in an okay shape. It's really hard for me to imagine that a US judge is bold enough to destroy an American jewel like Google, that they want to taint their name by destroying a great company like this, right? Because if you were to break up Google, everything is intertwined here. The way they set up their system is exactly for purposes like these, where if you were to take out YouTube, as for example, it would impact the rest of the business because everything, all the data is intertwined into one single location.